The research station floated quietly in the darkness of space, far away from any star or planet. It was a massive structure made of metal and glass, built by 17 different alien species working together. Inside, hundreds of scientists moved through the bright corridors talking in dozens of different languages. Their voices mixed together through the translation devices everyone wore on their collars. Dr. Vorath stood in the main observation room, staring out the enormous window. He was tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected the dim light. His four-fingered hands pressed against the glass as he looked at the object floating in space ahead. The artifact was huge, almost as big as a small moon. It looked like a giant crystal sphere, but its surface was dull and gray. No light came from it. No energy readings showed on any of the scanners. It was completely dead. For 70 days, the scientists had tried everything they could think of. They shot electromagnetic pulses at it. They used gravity manipulation devices. They even tried quantum entanglement technology that cost more money than most planets made in a year. Nothing worked. The artifact just floated there, silent and cold like a giant piece of space junk. Vorath turned away from the window and looked at the holographic screens floating around the room. Each screen showed test results, all of them failures. Red text covered every display. His assistant, a creature named Quen who looked like a giant insect with purple armor, clicked her mandibles together in frustration. "We have tried 147 different methods," Quen said, her voice buzzing through the translator. "Nothing makes it respond. Maybe the predecessors who built this thing did not build it to work anymore. Maybe it is just broken." Vorath did not want to believe that. The predecessors were legendary, a civilization that existed millions of years ago. They had technology so advanced that modern species could barely understand it. They had disappeared mysteriously, leaving behind artifacts like this one scattered across the galaxy. Every artifact ever found had incredible power. This one could not be different. It could not be broken. There had to be a way to turn it on. "We will keep trying," Vorath said firmly. "We did not bring the greatest minds in the galaxy here to give up." Quen said nothing, but her antennae drooped in a way that meant she disagreed. The human arrived 3 weeks late. His name was Jinho, and he looked embarrassed when he stepped off the transport ship. He was young, maybe 30 years old, with black hair and tired eyes. He apologized several times for the delay, explaining that his ship's navigation system had malfunctioned. Most of the alien scientists barely noticed him. Humans were new to space travel, only achieving faster-than-light technology 50 years ago. Many species still thought of them as primitive. Jinho was given a small room near the observation deck and assigned to documentation work. His job was simple: record all the tests, write reports, organize data files. It was boring work that nobody else wanted to do. Jinho did not complain. He was just happy to be there, to see an actual predecessor artifact with his own eyes. Every evening after the other scientists went to their quarters to rest, Jinho would sit alone in the observation lounge. The room had a massive curved window that showed the artifact floating in space. He would bring his tablet computer and review the day's data, looking for patterns or details that others might have missed. The artifact never changed. It just hung there in the darkness, surrounded by stars. On the 73rd day, Jinho sat in his usual spot. The station was quiet. The simulated night cycle had begun, and most of the crew was sleeping. Only a few people remained at their stations, monitoring equipment that never showed anything interesting. Jinho yawned and rubbed his eyes. He had been reading the same report for an hour, and nothing new jumped out at him. The air recycling system turned on with a soft hum. It was an automatic process that happened every few hours, circulating fresh air through the station. But the sudden air movement stirred up dust that had collected in the corners of the room. The station's filters were good, but they were not perfect. Tiny particles floated through the air, invisible until they caught the light just right. Jinho felt the tickle in his nose immediately. He knew what was coming. He tried to hold it back, pressing his finger under his nose like people do when they want to stop a sneeze. But it did not work. The tickle got stronger and stronger until he could not fight it anymore. The sneeze exploded out of him. It was loud in the quiet room, echoing off the metal walls. Jinho grabbed a tissue from his pocket and wiped his nose, feeling embarrassed even though nobody was around to see him. Then he looked up at the artifact. Light was spreading across its surface. Blue and gold patterns raced along circuits that had been dead and gray for millions of years. The patterns moved like lightning, branching and connecting in ways that made Jinho's eyes hurt to follow. The light got brighter and brighter, turning the observation lounge into a brilliant blue-gold cave. Jinho had to cover his eyes with his hands because it was so bright. Alarms started screaming throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed in all the corridors. The alarm sound was so loud that it woke everyone instantly. Scientists ran from their rooms, some still wearing sleeping clothes, others tripping over their own feet in confusion. They grabbed equipment and rushed toward the observation deck, shouting questions in a dozen different languages. Vorath reached the observation lounge first. He stopped in the doorway, his silver eyes wide with shock. His mouth hung open as he stared at the glowing artifact. Behind him, other scientists crowded into the doorway, all of them stunned into silence. "What did you do?" Vorath finally asked, turning to look at Jinho. Jinho was still blinking, trying to clear the bright spots from his vision. He looked confused and a little scared. "I did not do anything," he said. "You must have done something," Vorath insisted, walking closer. "What were you doing right before it activated?" Jinho thought about it. "I was just sitting here reading reports. Then the air system turned on and dust got in my nose and I—" He trailed off, suddenly realizing how ridiculous it would sound. "You what?" Vorath demanded. "I sneezed," Jinho said quietly. "You what?" "I sneezed. That is all. The dust made me sneeze, and then the artifact turned on." Quen had arrived now, along with dozens of other scientists. They all stared at Jinho like he had just said something in a completely made-up language. A sneeze? The artifact had been studied by the smartest beings in the galaxy for 70 days. They had used technology worth billions of credits. And it turned on because a human sneezed? "That is impossible," said one scientist, a creature with tentacles instead of arms. "Completely absurd," agreed another, whose body was made of living crystals. But the artifact was glowing. That was a fact. And it had been completely dead until 30 seconds ago. That was also a fact. And the only thing that had changed was that the human had sneezed. Vorath pulled out his personal scanner and pointed it at the artifact. The device beeped and showed readings that made his face go pale. Energy signatures, active power systems, information processing. The artifact was not just glowing for show. It was fully operational, running at levels that their best estimates had predicted. "Initiate full sensor sweeps," Vorath ordered, his voice shaking slightly. "I want every scanner we have pointed at that thing. And get me a detailed biological scan of the human. Everything. DNA, brain patterns, body chemistry, all of it." Scientists scattered to follow his orders. Within minutes, the observation lounge was filled with scanning equipment. Sensors pointed at the artifact from every angle, recording data at incredible speeds. Other sensors pointed at Jinho, who sat very still and tried not to look uncomfortable. The artifact continued to glow, its patterns shifting and changing in ways that seemed almost alive. It pulsed gently like it was breathing, and if Jinho looked very carefully, he could see that the pulses matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Something impossible had just happened. Something that would change everything humans thought they knew about themselves and their place in the galaxy, and it had started with a sneeze. The emergency conference room was chaos. Scientists from 17 different species crowded around the long metal table, all talking at once. Some spoke calmly, others shouted. The translation devices worked overtime, creating a noise that sounded like 100 radio stations playing at the same time. Holographic screens floated everywhere, showing data about the artifact, about Jinho, about everything that had happened in the last 2 hours. Dr. Vorath stood at the head of the table trying to restore order. His 4 fingers drummed against the table surface, making a rhythmic tapping sound that usually made others quiet down. Today nobody paid attention. The discovery was too big, too strange, too important for normal rules. "Everyone please," Vorath said loudly. When that did not work, he activated the room's central speaker system. His voice boomed out. "Everyone be quiet." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. "Thank you," Vorath said, his voice normal again. "We need to approach this scientifically. One at a time, please share your observations." A scientist named Threll spoke first. He looked like a floating jellyfish with glowing spots on his transparent body. The energy readings from the artifact increased by 8,000% in 3 seconds. That kind of power surge is unprecedented. Something triggered a massive activation sequence. "Yes, we know that," Quen said impatiently, her mandibles clicking. "The question is what? For 70 days we tried everything. electromagnetic pulses, gravity waves, quantum entanglement, thermal manipulation, sonic frequencies, and 142 other methods. Nothing worked. Then the human sneezes once and it turns on immediately. That cannot be a coincidence. It must be a coincidence, insisted Dr. Vorath. The artifact was clearly on some kind of delayed timer. The activation was scheduled to happen at that exact moment. The human sneeze had nothing to do with it. The timing was purely coincidental. Several scientists nodded in agreement. That explanation made sense. It fit with how they understood the universe. Random biological functions could not activate ancient technology. That was impossible, but Quen was not convinced. She pulled up data on her holographic screen and projected it for everyone to see. "Look at the activation pattern," she said, pointing to the graph. The artifact went from 0 activity to full power in 2.3 seconds. That is not a gradual wake-up. That is an immediate response to a trigger. And the only new variable in the environment was the human. Jinho sat at the far end of the table feeling very uncomfortable. Every few minutes someone would turn and stare at him like he was a puzzle to solve. Some looked curious, some looked suspicious, and a few looked angry, as if he had somehow cheated at a game they were all playing. Dr. Murray, another human scientist, sat next to Jinho. She was older than him, maybe 40, with short black hair and smart eyes that missed nothing. She had arrived at the station 2 days after Jinho and worked in the astrophysics department. They had become friends, partly because there were only 6 humans on the entire station, and it was nice to talk to someone from home. "Maybe we should test it," Mireille suggested carefully. "If the sneeze really did activate it, we should be able to replicate the result. That is basic scientific method, right? Test, observe, repeat." Vorath looked like he wanted to argue, but he could not. She was right. If they wanted to prove or disprove the sneeze theory, they needed to test it properly. "Fine," he said. "We will conduct a controlled experiment. We will recreate the exact conditions and see what happens." 30 minutes later, Jinho found himself back in the observation lounge. But now the room was filled with equipment. Scanners pointed at him from every direction. Sensors covered the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. Cables ran everywhere like mechanical snakes. The other scientists watched from behind a protective barrier, their eyes fixed on him. "Whenever you are ready," Vorath said through the speaker system. Jinho stood there feeling stupid. How does someone sneeze on purpose? He tried thinking about things that made him sneeze: dust, pollen, pepper, cat fur. Nothing happened. The artifact continued glowing steadily, its light patterns moving in slow waves across its surface. He tried breathing in sharply through his nose. Nothing. He tried looking at the bright lights. Nothing. He even tried the old trick of looking at something bright and then looking away quickly. Still nothing. "This is pointless," muttered one of the scientists watching. Jinho did not know his name, but he looked like a giant snake with arms. "We are wasting time on human superstition." Jinho felt his face get hot with embarrassment. He was about to give up when Miri's voice came through the speaker. "Wait," she said excitedly. "Look at the electromagnetic readings. There is a pattern." She was right. The sensors showed tiny changes in the electromagnetic field around Jinho. The changes matched his breathing. Every time he breathed in, the field shifted slightly. Every time he breathed out, it shifted again. The changes were so small that normal equipment would never detect them. But more interesting was what the artifact did. Its glow pulsed very slightly in response to Jinho's breathing. The pulse was so small that human eyes could not see it. But the sensitive equipment picked it up clearly. "It is reading him," Quen said softly, her aggressive tone gone. She sounded amazed. "The artifact is monitoring his biological processes." This discovery changed everything. For the next week, the scientists worked constantly, barely sleeping. They brought every human on the station to the observation lounge one by one. There was Jinho, Mireille, and 4 others: Daiho, Sumi, Taeyeon, and Kyungho. Each human stood in front of the artifact while machines recorded everything. The results were consistent. Every human produced small electromagnetic fields that matched the artifact's base frequency. The artifact responded to all of them, its glow pulsing gently when they came near. But Jinho's effect was still the strongest. When he stood close to the artifact, its patterns moved faster and brighter. Then they tested non-human species. A Greldak warrior, whose species was known for their strength and determination, stood in front of the artifact for 2 hours. He tried everything: shouting, meditation, even attempting to physically touch the energy barrier around the artifact. Nothing happened. The artifact ignored him completely. A Vexian telepath whose people could communicate through thoughts alone tried to connect mentally with the artifact. She concentrated so hard that her face turned purple. Still nothing. Dr. Vorath himself tried using his neural interface, a piece of technology that let him connect his brain directly to computers. He stood in front of the artifact with cables running from his head to a control panel, attempting to communicate through pure data. The artifact did not even flicker. Only humans got any response at all. The scientists tried to explain it in different ways. Maybe humans had unique brain structures. Maybe their DNA had some special marker. Maybe it was something in their diet or their evolutionary history. Every theory was tested and most were proven wrong. "This makes no sense," Vorath said during one of the daily meetings. His silver skin looked pale with exhaustion. The predecessors disappeared 2 million years ago. Humans did not exist then. Your species was not even close to evolving yet. How could they build technology specifically designed for humans? Nobody had an answer. The room was quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system. Then Jinho spoke up. He had been quiet during most meetings, not wanting to interrupt the important scientists. But now he had an idea. "Maybe it is not about humans specifically," he said. Everyone turned to look at him. "Maybe it is about something humans have that other species do not have. Some quality or characteristic, such as?" Quen asked. "I do not know," Jinho admitted. "But if we want to understand this, we need to stop thinking it is impossible." It happened. We saw it happen. So instead of saying it cannot be true, maybe we should figure out how it is true. Mirai nodded in agreement. He is right. We are approaching this from the wrong direction. We keep trying to explain why it should not work instead of studying why it does work. Vorath was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, a sound that came out like wind through a tunnel. "You are both correct," he said. "We have been letting our assumptions blind us. Starting tomorrow, we change our approach. We stop trying to prove this is impossible and start trying to understand how it works." The meeting ended, and scientists filed out of the room, talking quietly among themselves. Jinho remained sitting, staring at the holographic display that showed the artifact rotating slowly in space. Its light pulsed steadily like a heartbeat. Mirai put a hand on his shoulder. "You did good," she said. "I just sneezed," Jinho replied. "No," Mirai said with a smile. "You opened a door that has been locked for 2 million years. That is a bit more than just sneezing." Outside the window, the artifact glowed in the darkness, keeping its secrets for now. But those secrets were starting to crack open, little by little, and everything was about to change. Dr. Borum arrived on the station 3 weeks after the activation incident. Her transport ship docked smoothly, and she stepped out carrying only a small bag and a portable laboratory kit. She was young, only 28 years old, but she had already published important research papers about genetics and biology. The Galactic Council had specifically requested her for this mission. Borum had black hair tied back in a practical ponytail and wore thick glasses, even though laser surgery could have fixed her vision easily. She said she liked glasses. They helped her think. Within an hour of arriving, she had set up her equipment in one of the science labs and was already running tests. Jinho met her in the cafeteria on her second day. The cafeteria served food for dozens of different species, which meant there was a complicated system of separated areas to prevent anyone from accidentally poisoning themselves. The human section was small but comfortable, with familiar foods that reminded them of Earth. "You are Jinho, right?" Borum asked, sitting down across from him with a tray of rice and vegetables. The sneezer. Jinho had heard that nickname too many times now. "Yes, that is me. The famous sneezer," Borum laughed. "Sorry, but you have to admit it is a pretty unique claim to fame. Most scientists spend years trying to make discoveries. You did it with a sneeze." "I did not try to do anything," Jinho said. "It just happened." "The best discoveries usually do," Borum replied. She took a bite of her food and then pulled out her tablet computer. "I have been looking at all the biological data they collected from you and the other humans. I think I found something." "Already? You just got here." "I had access to the data during my trip here, spent the whole journey analyzing it." She turned the tablet so Jinho could see. The screen showed complex graphs and charts that made no sense to him. "See this? This is your neural activity pattern, and this is the artifact's base frequency. Watch what happens when I overlay them." She pressed a button and the two patterns merged on the screen. They matched almost perfectly, like two puzzle pieces fitting together. "They are the same," Jinho said, amazed. "Not exactly the same, but very close." Borum corrected. "Close enough that they resonate with each other. Like how a wine glass sings when you run your finger around the rim. Your brainwaves create a frequency that the artifact recognizes and responds to. But why? Why would ancient aliens build something that responds to human brainwaves? That is the question, is it not?" Borum said, her eyes bright with curiosity. "And I intend to find the answer." 3 days later, Borum presented her findings to the full research team. The conference room was packed with scientists, all eager to hear what she had discovered. Holographic screens floated in the air, showing her data in brilliant colors. "It is not DNA," Borum began, standing confidently at the front of the room. "Every carbon-based life form has some kind of genetic code. Humans are not unique in that way. The Greldak have DNA. The Vexians have DNA. Even the Telkarans have something similar." She changed the display to show a different image. "What makes humans different is the specific frequency at which our neurons fire. Our brain cells communicate using electrical signals, and those signals create a pattern. That pattern produces an electromagnetic field, very small but measurable." Quen leaned forward in her seat. "All species with brains produce electromagnetic fields. Why are humans special?" "Because of this," Borum said, pulling up another chart. "This is the frequency spectrum of human neural activity, and this is the predecessor artifact's base harmonic frequency. They match." The room erupted in conversation. Scientists talked over each other, some excited, others skeptical. Vorath raised his hand for silence. "That still does not explain the timing," he said. "If the artifact responds to human neural patterns, why did it not activate as soon as humans arrived at the station? Why did it wait until Jinho sneezed?" Jinho had been thinking about that question every day. "Because it was not just about being near the artifact," he said slowly, working through the idea as he spoke. "It needed a specific trigger." The sneeze was sudden and strong. "It changed the air around me, changed my breathing, probably changed my brain patterns too because I was surprised. Maybe all of that together was enough to activate it." "A catalyst," Mireille added, catching on to his thinking. "The artifact was already reading our presence, sensing our neural patterns. But it needed confirmation. A strong, clear signal that we were really there." Borum nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. Or maybe it needed to confirm we were alive and functioning naturally. Not robots, not artificial intelligence, not holograms. Real biological humans with messy, imperfect biology." This idea fascinated the research team. Over the next 2 weeks, they conducted experiments that seemed silly, but produced real results. They documented every human biological function and measured how the artifact responded. When Taeyeon laughed at a joke, the artifact's light patterns shifted slightly, becoming more complex. When Kyung-ho cried while watching a sad video from Earth, the artifact's glow became softer and warmer. When Sumi yawned after staying up too late, the artifact pulsed in a rhythm that matched her tiredness, but sneezes still produced the strongest response. Every time any human sneezed near the artifact, it flared brightly, sending waves of light across its surface like ripples on water. "It is like a lock," Jinho said one night. He and Mireille had developed a routine of meeting in the observation lounge late at night, when most of the station was quiet. They would sit and watch the artifact, talking about their theories and ideas. "We are not just turning it on. We are unlocking something. But what?" Mireille asked. She had her tablet in her lap, covered in notes and diagrams. "It has been active for weeks now, but all it does is glow and respond to us. There must be more to it." Jinho moved closer to the window, studying the patterns of light that danced across the artifact's surface. He had been watching those patterns every day, and he was starting to notice things. They were not random. They repeated in sequences, like words in a language he could not quite read. "What if we are looking at this wrong?" he said. "What if turning it on was not the goal? What if that was just step one?" "Step one of what?" Before Jinho could answer, the door opened. Borum rushed in, her hair messy and her glasses crooked. She carried her tablet in both hands, holding it like it was the most precious thing in the world. "You need to see this," she said breathlessly. "I have been analyzing the light patterns the artifact makes. Really analyzing them. breaking them down into mathematical components. And I found something incredible. She set her tablet on the table and projected a holographic display. It showed the artifact's light patterns broken down into sequences of numbers and symbols. These are not just pretty lights, Borum explained. They are information, data. The artifact is not just responding to us. It is communicating with us. Mirai stood up quickly, moving closer to study the display. What kind of information? I am not sure yet. The patterns are incredibly complex, but they follow mathematical rules. Fibonacci sequences, prime number progressions, geometric ratios. These are universal mathematical concepts that any intelligent species would recognize. It is teaching us, Jinho said softly, showing us how to understand it. Maybe, Borum agreed. But here's the really strange part. I asked Quen to analyze these same patterns. She is brilliant with mathematics, probably better than any human, but she said she could not see them clearly. The patterns exist in a frequency of light that human eyes can perceive much better than other species. It is like the artifact is displaying information specifically in a way that humans can read. The three humans stood in silence, looking at the data floating in the air before them. The implications were staggering. The predecessors had not just left behind technology that responded to humans. They had left behind a message encoded in light, designed specifically for human eyes to see and human brains to understand. Why us? Mirai whispered. Why humans? We are so young, so new. 2 million years ago, our ancestors were still living in trees, eating fruits and hiding from predators. We had not even invented fire yet. How could the predecessors have known about us? Maybe they did not know about us specifically, Jinho suggested. Maybe they knew about what we would become. Maybe they saw potential in our ancestors that would not develop for millions of years. Or maybe, Borum said quietly, time works differently than we think it does. Maybe the predecessors could see forward through time, or calculate probability so well it was like seeing the future. Maybe they knew we were coming. Outside the window, the artifact pulsed steadily, its patterns of light writing messages that humans were only beginning to understand. Somewhere in those patterns was a truth that would change everything, and slowly, piece by piece, they were learning to read it. The night shift continued on the station. Scientists slept in their quarters while automated systems monitored the artifact. But in the observation lounge, 3 humans sat and watched the light show, knowing that they were witnessing something impossible and wonderful. They were reading a message written 2 million years ago by beings who had somehow known that humans would one day stand here and see it. And the message was just beginning. The breakthrough happened during a thunderstorm. Well, not a real thunderstorm. The station floated in deep space where there was no weather at all, but the recreation bay had environmental simulators that could create different conditions from planets across the galaxy. The Galactic Council required long-term space stations to provide varied environments to help keep crews mentally healthy. Hyun was in the recreation bay when it happened. He was the 6th human on the station, a young engineer who usually worked on maintaining the life support systems. He was tired after a long shift and had come to the rec bay to relax. The environmental system was set to simulate an Earth thunderstorm, complete with dark clouds projected on the ceiling and the sound of rain pattering against the dome. Hyun sat in a comfortable chair, watching the simulated storm. It reminded him of home, of soul, of lazy afternoons watching real rain fall on real streets. The memory made him drowsy. His eyes started to close. Thunder boomed through the speakers. The sound was loud and sudden. Hyun jumped in his chair, his heart racing. For a moment, he forgot where he was. His body reacted with pure instinct, flooding his bloodstream with adrenaline, preparing to run from danger that did not exist. The artifact responded immediately. All across the station, displays flickered and changed. The random patterns that had been showing for weeks suddenly locked into place, becoming structured and organized. In the main laboratory, alarms started beeping. Scientists who had been working late looked up in shock as their screens filled with data. More information pouring in during 30 seconds than they had collected in 3 months. Jinho was in his quarters when the alarms went off. He grabbed his jacket and ran toward the laboratory, his heart pounding. By the time he arrived, the room was already crowded with scientists in various states of dress. Some wore pajamas. Others had clearly just woken up. But everyone was focused on the displays, watching in amazement as data flooded in. What happened? Jinho asked, pushing through the crowd. Borum was already at her station, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "It is broadcasting," she said, her voice shaking with excitement. The artifact is not just responding anymore. It is sending out massive amounts of information. Mireille pointed to a biosensor display. "Look, Hyun's readings." His adrenaline spiked about 2 minutes ago. Right when this started, the display showed Hyun's vital signs. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure up, stress hormones flooding his system. It was a classic fear response, the kind that happens when someone gets startled or scared. The fear triggered it. Jinho breathed. Like the sneeze, but different. Another strong biological reaction. Not just any reaction, Borum corrected, her eyes scanning the incoming data. An emotional one. Sneezing is involuntary but mostly physical. Fear is emotional. The artifact is responding to human emotions now. The holographic display in the center of the laboratory began to organize the data automatically. The station's computer systems were translating the information, using linguistic algorithms and pattern recognition to convert the alien symbols into something humans could understand. Words started appearing in glowing text floating in the air. Everyone in the room fell silent, reading. To those who follow, the translation began. We leave this gift not out of obligation, but out of hope. The message continued, and as it did, scientists from other species began arriving in the laboratory. They stood at the edges of the room, watching quietly as the predecessor message revealed itself. Our civilization reached the apex of technological achievement, the text read. We transcended biology, conquered entropy, bent reality itself to our will. We became like gods, immortal and all-powerful, and in doing so we lost something precious. The message described a civilization that had evolved beyond physical bodies. The predecessors had transformed themselves into pure consciousness, existing as patterns of energy that could never die, never age, never suffer. They had eliminated every limitation that biology imposed. They were perfect. But perfection is a prison, the message continued. When there is no possibility of failure, success has no meaning. When there is no possibility of death, life has no value. When there is no possibility of pain, joy becomes hollow. We discovered too late that existence without struggle is not existence at all. It is just waiting. Tears ran down Mireille's face as she read. She was not alone. Several other humans in the room were crying too, moved by the profound sadness in the ancient words. The predecessors had searched the galaxy for a solution. They studied thousands of species trying to understand what they had lost. They could not simply return to biological form. Once transformed, the process was irreversible. They were trapped in their perfect, meaningless existence forever. Then we found your world, the message said. A small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star. On that planet was a species still in its infancy. You were primitive by our standards. You had barely learned to use tools. You had not even discovered fire yet, but you had something we had lost. You had chaos. The word chaos appeared in the holographic display in brilliant colors, larger than the other words. You are chaos, the message read. Beautiful, unpredictable, inefficient chaos. You sneeze at important moments. You laugh when you should be serious. You cry over things that do not matter and fight over things that do. You make decisions based on emotions instead of logic. You are imperfect in every possible way, and that imperfection is the most valuable thing in the universe. Jinho felt something shift in his chest as he read those words. All his life, humans had been considered lesser in the galaxy. Primitive, clumsy, emotional, too biological, too imperfect. And here was an ancient godlike civilization saying that those imperfections were humanity's greatest strength. The message continued, explaining that the predecessors could not save themselves. Their transformation was permanent, but they could leave something behind. They could create gifts for the species that still had what they had lost. We have left artifacts throughout the galaxy, the text explained. Each one contains technology that will only respond to living, imperfect beings. We could not make them universal. Technology that responds to everything responds to nothing, so we chose to key them to your specific biology, to your specific neural patterns, to your specific way of being alive. The message listed coordinates, thousands of them, appearing faster than anyone could write them down. The station's computers automatically recorded everything. Each coordinate marked another predecessor artifact, waiting somewhere in the galaxy for humans to find it. We do this not to make you powerful, the message said. You will become powerful on your own in time. We do this as a reminder. These artifacts will work for you because you are imperfect, because you sneeze, because you laugh and cry and feel fear, because you are chaotic and messy and wonderfully, gloriously alive. The final words of the message appeared slowly, as if the predecessors wanted them to be read carefully. We are gone. We transformed ourselves into something eternal and perfect, and in doing so we died in every way that matters. But through you, perhaps some echo of what we were will continue. Be messy, be inefficient, be emotional. Make mistakes. Feel too much. Care about things that do not matter. And never ever apologize for being alive. Never trade your chaos for perfection. We made that trade and we lost everything. The message ended. The holographic display faded. The laboratory was completely silent. Then someone started laughing. It was Quen, the insectoid researcher who had been frustrated and skeptical from the beginning. Her laughter sounded strange through the translator, like bells ringing, but it was genuine. She was laughing at the cosmic joke of it all. The laughter spread through the room like a wave. Scientists of every species found themselves laughing, even though many of them did not fully understand why. It was absurd. It was tragic. It was beautiful. The most advanced civilization in galactic history had left their entire legacy to the newest, messiest, most imperfect species around. Dr. Vorath walked over to Jinho and placed his four-fingered hand on the young human's shoulder. The xenoarchaeologist's silver eyes were wet, though his species did not cry the same way humans did. I suppose, Vorath said, his voice thick with emotion. We have quite a lot of work ahead of us, thousands of artifacts to find and study. I suppose we do, Jinho agreed. Outside the window, the artifact pulsed gently, its mission complete. It had waited 2 million years to deliver its message. Now finally it could rest. But across the galaxy, other artifacts were waking up, sensing that humans had received the message and were ready to claim their inheritance. The age of human exploration was just beginning, and it would be wonderfully, beautifully chaotic. 6 months had passed since the artifact revealed its message. The research station had transformed completely during that time. What started as a quiet scientific outpost was now one of the busiest locations in the galaxy. Ships arrived and left every day, bringing researchers, diplomats, journalists, and tourists from hundreds of worlds. Everyone wanted to see the predecessor artifact that had chosen humanity. The station had expanded too. New modules were added weekly to house all the people. The observation lounge where Jinho had sneezed was now officially called the First Contact Bay, despite Jinho's many protests against the embarrassing name. A plaque on the wall told the story of what happened there, and visitors often took pictures in front of it. Jinho stood at the window of the First Contact Bay, watching the latest transport ship dock. He recognized the ship's markings. It was from Earth, carrying another group of young researchers fresh from universities. They would be excited and nervous just like he had been 6 months ago. Back then he was just a junior scientist nobody paid attention to. Now he was famous across the galaxy as the man who sneezed and changed history. Feeling nostalgic? Mirai asked, walking up beside him. She looked tired but happy. She had been promoted to deputy director of the Predecessor Research Initiative, an organization created specifically to study and manage the thousands of artifacts scattered across the galaxy. The job kept her constantly traveling between Earth and dozens of different star systems. Just thinking about how strange life is, Jinho replied. 6 months ago I was nobody. Now I get recognized everywhere I go. People ask me to sneeze for them like it is a magic trick. Mirai laughed. You are not just the guy who sneezed. You are the guy whose sneeze proved that humanity was chosen by the predecessors 2 million years ago. It still does not make sense, Jinho said. How do they know about us? Humans did not exist when they were alive. Borum published 3 papers about it. Something about time being more flexible than we understand. Or maybe the predecessors could calculate probability so accurately that it was like seeing the future. Or maybe causality works differently than we think. Mirai shrugged. Honestly, it makes my head hurt to think about it too much. The philosophical questions had kept scientists busy for months. The debate filled academic journals and conference halls. Some believed the predecessors could see through time. Others thought they had calculated humanity's evolution through pure mathematics. A few radical thinkers suggested that time was circular, and the predecessors had actually met humans before, in a different cycle of universal history. Nobody knew for certain. The artifact's message had answered many questions but created just as many new ones. The Galactic Council is still arguing about the artifacts, Mireille continued, pulling out her tablet to show Jinho the latest messages. The Telkarans want them classified as universal heritage that belongs to everyone. The Vexians think humans should have complete control since the artifacts only work for us, and the Earth delegation keeps trying to explain that we do not even understand what most of these artifacts do yet. That was true. The first artifact, the one floating outside the station window, had revealed its purpose within weeks of the message. It was a library, a vast storage device containing knowledge from the predecessor civilization. But the information was not given freely. It had to be earned through study and research. The artifact made learning easier for humans, creating a kind of intuitive understanding, but it still required work. Humans were making incredible progress. Technologies that should have taken decades to develop were being understood in months. Medical treatments, engineering techniques, mathematical concepts that had seemed impossibly complex now became clearer when studied near the artifact. But the other artifacts across the galaxy were more mysterious. The coordinates from the message had led expeditions to thousands of locations. Some artifacts were easy to find, floating in open space or sitting on barren moons. Others were hidden in difficult places, deep underwater or buried in planetary cores. And each artifact was different. One orbited a dying red star and made beautiful music when humans sang near it. The music changed based on the emotions in the singing, creating harmonies that made listeners cry. Nobody knew what its real purpose was, but the music was beautiful enough that some researchers thought maybe that was the point. Maybe it was just art. Another artifact sat at the bottom of an ocean on a water world. When humans swam near it, the artifact created displays of light that moved through the water like living creatures. The lights responded to touch, to movement, to the swimmer's heartbeat. It was mesmerizing to watch, but its function remained unknown. A third artifact appeared to be some kind of terraforming device, capable of changing planetary atmospheres and climates. But its controls were locked, refusing to activate fully. Borum theorized that it would only unlock when humanity proved they were responsible enough to use such power. That made sense. The predecessors had warned against pursuing perfection. They would not give humanity godlike power over planets without making sure humans understood the responsibility. Dr. Vorath sent another message, Jinho said, changing the subject. He is leading the expedition to the artifact in the Keldara system. He wants me to come along for historical documentation. Mireille smiled. That is Vorath's way of apologizing. He thought you were insignificant 6 months ago. Now he wants the human who sneezed on his team for luck. Should I go? Jinho asked. He had been thinking about the invitation for days. Part of him wanted to return to Earth, to walk under a real sky, to feel real rain instead of simulated storms. He was tired of living in space stations and ships. He missed home, but another part of him, the part that had dreamed of exploring the stars since childhood, could not resist. There were thousands of artifacts waiting to be found. Each one was a mystery, a gift, a piece of the predecessor legacy. How could he walk away from that? That is your decision, Mireille said gently. But I know you. You are not someone who walks away from mysteries. You will regret it if you do not go. She was right, and Jinho knew it. I will send him a message saying yes. Good, Mireille said. The galaxy needs more humans out there finding these gifts. And besides, who knows what will happen? Maybe you will sneeze on another artifact and activate something amazing. They both laughed at that. It had become a running joke among the research teams. Whenever they found a new artifact and could not figure out how to activate it, someone would joke that they should bring Jinho and his magic sneeze. Behind them, the artifact pulsed gently, its light washing over the observation bay in waves of blue and gold. It had been glowing continuously for 6 months now, never dimming, never fading. The energy readings showed it could maintain this state for millions of years without any external power source. Predecessor technology was incredible in ways that modern science was only beginning to understand. A group of new researchers entered the first contact bay, led by a guide who was telling them the story of the activation. Jinho recognized the look on their faces. Excitement, wonder, a little bit of fear. These young scientists would spend months or years studying the artifacts. Some would make important discoveries. Others would struggle with questions that had no easy answers. But all of them would be changed by the experience. One of the new researchers, a young woman named Yunji, noticed Jinho standing by the window. Her eyes went wide with recognition. "Are you him?" she asked, approaching nervously. "The one who sneezed?" Jinho sighed but smiled. "Yes, that is me. Can I ask you something?" Yoonji said. "How does it feel knowing that the predecessors chose us?" Chose humanity? It was a question Jinho had been asked 100 times. He had given different answers depending on his mood. Sometimes he talked about the responsibility it created. Sometimes he mentioned the confusion and philosophical implications. But today, standing in the first contact bay with the artifact glowing behind him, he gave the answer that felt most true. "It feels like coming home," he said. "The whole galaxy made us feel small and new and insignificant. Other species look down on us because we are emotional and imperfect. But the predecessors saw those imperfections and said they were valuable. They said our chaos, our messiness, our biology was worth preserving. That feels like being told you matter exactly as you are." Yoonji nodded, understanding. "Thank you," she said quietly. The group moved on, continuing their tour. Mirai checked her tablet and made a face. "I have another conference call in 10 minutes. Politics and artifact management. Very exciting." Her tone made it clear she found it anything but exciting. "Go," Jinho said. "I will stay here for a while." Mirai left and Jinho was alone again with the artifact. He moved closer to the window, pressing his hand against the glass like he had done countless times before. The artifact pulsed in response, its light brightening slightly, acknowledging his presence. Jinho felt the tickle in his nose. The air recyclers had kicked on again, stirring up dust. He smiled, knowing what was coming. The sneeze was small, almost quiet, just a little achoo that barely echoed in the large room. The artifact flared brighter, its light dancing across its surface in patterns that looked almost playful. Almost happy. "You are welcome," Jinho said softly to the ancient machine. Outside the station, across the vast emptiness of space, other artifacts sensed the signal. They stirred in their hiding places, some floating in the darkness between stars, others buried deep in planets, still others drifting through nebulas and asteroid fields. They had waited for 2 million years, patient and silent. Now their time had come. Humanity was spreading through the galaxy, bringing their chaos and imperfection with them. They would find the artifacts one by one. They would unlock the gifts the predecessors had left. And they would prove that being imperfect was not a weakness but the most important strength of all. The age of the predecessors had ended long ago, lost to their pursuit of perfection. But the age of humanity was just beginning, and it would be messy and complicated and beautiful in everything the predecessors had lost and wanted to preserve. Jinho sneezed again, just a small biological function, completely ordinary and completely insignificant. And across the galaxy the artifacts glowed a little brighter, celebrating the chaos of life. The inheritance had been claimed. Now it was time to see what humanity would do with it.